Hello, readers. So last week you learned about fiction stories and their elements or the parts of the story. So one of those was the plot. I want you to try to remember what plot means. If you remember, just kind of give yourself a thumbs up. So remember that the plot is a series of events that makes up a story. Today we're going to try to review the plot in a story. And I'm going to show you a strategy that we can use to help you summarize the plot to any story that you read or a story that we read together. So we're going to be talking about summarizing the plot. Let's talk about what a summary is. What do you think a summary is? A summary is the retelling of the main events in a story in just a shorter version for your reader to get interested in whatever it is that you've read. So when it comes to summarizing, there's 3 basic steps on how to summarize your plot. So step 1 to summarizing is, what does the character want? We have to think about what the character is wanting or maybe looking for in the story. What is their one maybe adventure that they're going on to discover, treasure, or what are they looking for emotionally? Are they looking for friends? It could be anything. It could be a series of things. So step number 1, what does the character want? Step number 2 is think of one event per character that connects back to what they want. As you read, you have to think about what who the main characters are. What do they do throughout the story that might help us connect back to the want of the story? You have to think about what they want. For example, last week we read Owl Moon, and the main character in the story really wanted to see an owl. So her want was to go owling and see an owl. Her dad helped her reach what she wanted, right? He wanted his daughter to also see an owl. So they both had that want, and at the end of the story she did get to see one. And last but not least, our last step is summarize by saying the events in order. This is the most important step, because if you say these steps out of order, your summary won't make sense. To help you make sure that you summarize correctly and you're putting your events in order, you're going to use your fingers to put your events in order. So 1, first this happened, then this happened, and then this happened, and finally, or if there's 5 main events that you can think of, then you'll use all 5 of your fingers. What I want you to do is pause the video here and practice using that strategy. Use the tips of your fingers to retell the main events in Owl Moon. Hopefully you were able to get it. I'm going to read you another story, and I want you to practice this strategy as you read. I'm going to read through Owl Moon, and I want you to be able to practice the strategy as I read. Owl Moon. It was late one winter night, long past my bedtime, when Pa and I went owling. There was no wind. The trees stood still as giant statues, and the moon was so bright the sky seemed to shine. Somewhere behind us a train whistle blew long and low, like a sad, sad song. I could hear it through the woolen cap Pa had pulled over my ears. A farm dog answered the train, and then a second dog joined in. They sang out, trains and dogs, for a real long time. And when their voices faded away, it was as quiet as a dream. We walked on towards the woods, Pa and I. Our feet crunched over the crisp snow, and little gray footprints followed us. Pa made a long shadow, but mine was short and round. I had to run after him every now and then to keep up, and my short, round shadow bumped after me. But I never called out. If you go owling, you have to be quiet. That's what Pa always says. I had to keep waiting to go owling with Pa for a long, long time. We reached the line of the pine trees, black and pointy against the sky, and Pa held up his hands. I stopped right where I was and waited. He looked up as if searching the stars, as if reading a map up there. The moon made his face into a silver mask. Then he called, "Ooh, ooh," the sound of a great horned owl. Again he called out, and then again. After each call he was silent, and for a moment we listened, but there was no answer. Pa shrugged, and I shrugged. I was not disappointed. My brothers all said sometimes there's an owl and sometimes there isn't. We walked on. I could feel the cold, as if someone's icy hand was palmed down on my back, and my nose and the tops of my cheeks felt cold and hot at the same time. But I never said a word. If you go owling, you have to be quiet and make your own heat. We went into the woods. The shadows were the blackest things I had ever seen. They stained the white snow. My mouth felt furry, for the scarf over it was wet and warm. I didn't ask what kinds of things hide behind black trees in the middle of the night. When you go owling, you have to be brave. Then we came to a clearing in the dark woods. The moon was high above us. It seemed to fit exactly over the center of the clearing, and the snow below it was whiter than milk in a cereal bowl. I sighed, and Pa held up his hand at the sound. I put my mittens over the scarf over my mouth and listened hard. And then Pa called, "Woo-hoo! Woo-hoo!" I listened and looked so hard my ears hurt, and my eyes got cloudy with cold. Pa raised his face to call out again, but before he could open his mouth, an echo came threading its way through the trees. "Woo! Woo!" Pa almost smiled. Then he called back, "Woo!" Just as if he and the owl were talking about supper, or about the woods, or the moon, or the cold, I took my mittens off the scarf of my mouth, and I almost smiled too. The owl's call came closer from high up in the trees, on the edge of the meadow. Nothing in the meadow moved. All of a sudden, an owl shadow, part of a big tree shadow, lifted off and flew right over us. We watched silently with our heat in our mouths, and the head of all those words we had not spoken. The shadow hooted again. Pa turned on his big flashlight and caught the owl just as it was landing on a branch. For 1 minute, 3 minutes, maybe even 100 minutes, we stared at one another. Then the owl pumped its great wings and lifted off the branch, like a shadow without a sound. It flew back into the forest. "Time to go home," Pa said to me. I knew then I could talk. I could even laugh out loud, but I was a shadow as we walked home. When you go owling, and you don't need words, or warm, or anything but hope. That's what Pa says. The kind of hope that flies on silent wings under a shining owl moon. So, now that you've gotten to practice the strategy with Owl Moon, I'm going to assign you a book in Epic. You're going to read through, and you're going to list your main ideas, your main details that you would summarize in Schoology. Good luck, readers.